is Brad Treliving? Oh, that's kind of a silly question. You don't have Google. He's the GM of the Leafs. But that's the easy stuff. I mean, who is he really? Because let's be honest, this guy just got here, and all of Leafs Nation is speculating they might make this move, this move, this move. They might not make any moves, which is impossible, by the way. They have to make a bunch of moves. Whether it's the core four, I don't know. But I've done the research. I've looked into Brad Treliving, the trades he's made, the GMs he's traded with, the agents he works with, the players he's played with, because he played. So let's take a look at Brad Treliving's time as GM of the Calgary Flames and see what we can figure out. Real quick, think you know which way it's gonna go? Well, make your next bet at Sports Interaction. We got the NHL draft coming up, and there are all kinds of props that you can bet on, and I bet on a few, just a sprinkle. There's over-under draft position picks that you can do for a number of players. Nate Danielson, Andrew Crystal, Gavin Brindley, Matthew Wood, David Reinbacher. And you can even bet on players going in exact positions like Matvei Michkov, if you want to risk it, Adam Fantilli, Leo Carlson, Connor Bedard is I think we all agree he's a lock, right? Well, if you want to bet on that, head to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN and download the Sports Interaction app, but only if you're 19 plus. Please play responsibly. So you look at Brad Treliving's resume, and the Calgary Flames are paramount, and they were key to my research. Because if you want to look at the people that he's dealt with over his career, you got to remember that he had a career before the Calgary Flames. He was the assistant general manager with the Arizona Coyotes back in the day. The problem with that, knowing the phone calls he made, the trades he finalized, that information isn't accessible. But what you can do is go to capfriendly.com, like I very often do. And if you look, CapFriendly actually has a staff page for Brad Treliving. They have it for a ton of NHL executives. They don't just do players. In fact, if you're watching this right now and you don't want to know about Brad Treliving, you want to know about some other GM, all you got to do is go to capfriendly.com/staff/first name dash last name of the general manager. So for example, capfriendly.com/staff/Kyle-Dubas. And that will take you to Dubas's page on capfriendly.com. I was on this website for a long time today, so that's how I discovered it. There were 7 teams that Brad Treliving never made a trade with in his entire tenure as Calgary Flames general manager, which is wild because he's been GM there since April 2014, nearly a decade, 9 years. Those teams are Anaheim, Columbus, Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Vegas, and Winnipeg. Now you might be like, Steve, that's actually 6 teams. Yes, the 7th is Calgary. You cannot make a trade with yourself. Or is a buyout a trade with yourself? Kind of. And don't worry, we'll go in depth on Calgary later. There were 13 teams in the NHL that Brad Treliving made 1 trade with over his tenure with the Flames. I am not going to list all 13. He made 2 trades each with Boston, Carolina, Seattle, which is relevant because they just got here, Vancouver, which is relevant because they were in Calgary's division, and Washington. He made 3 trades with LA, who we'll get to, and Toronto, which is funny. He made 4 trades with just 3 different teams. Arizona, his former team, Chicago, and Florida. Then it gets awkward at the top. Brad Treliving made 5 deals with the Ottawa Senators while he was with the Calgary Flames, and the team he traded with the most, with 6 trades, the Montreal Canadiens. That shouldn't come as a surprise because Brad Treliving just became the GM of the Leafs. He was previously the GM of the Calgary Flames, who are way over in the Pacific Division, and that makes sense to trade out of conference, out of division. Teams are allowed to trade in division, and sometimes they do, but very often they like to avoid it. See Tuukka Rask going to the Boston Bruins. I want to see if you picked up on a very key issue here, because you don't trade with teams, you trade with general managers. Because general managers, like the players that they trade, go from team to team. They get hired and fired. Brad Treliving dealt with a number of general managers in his time with the Calgary Flames, but here are the GMs that he dealt with more than once. The GMs Brad Treliving has dealt with twice are Don Sweeney with the Bruins, John Chayka, who doesn't have a job right now, Bill Zito with the Panthers, Ken Holland with the Oilers, Dale Talon, who is a senior advisor with the Canucks right now, and Jim Benning, who's not working right now. Guys that Brad Treliving has dealt with 3 times. Ron Francis, and that's 1 with Carolina and 2 with Seattle, I believe. Stan Bowman, who's not working right now. Mark Bergevin, who's the AGM in LA. Kent Hughes in Montreal. Kyle Dubas, who is now with Pittsburgh, and Rob Blake with the LA Kings. Then there was no GM who Treliving dealt with 4 times, but there was 1 GM who he dealt with 5 times, the most in the entire NHL, Pierre Dorion with the Ottawa Senators. So if you've been watching my videos for a long time, listening to the podcast, you know why this is relevant. On Agent Provocateur, one of the podcasts on SDPN with Alan Walsh, who is a very famous player agent, he had on Doug Armstrong, who is the GM of the St. Louis Blues. And in that interview, I'm paraphrasing, Doug Armstrong meant that not every GM calls every GM all the time. Usually they stick to a smaller group of guys they call all the time. So I thought, oh, that's interesting, and I went and looked at Kyle Dubas's trade history with the Leafs. Lots of trades with the Blue Jackets, lots of trades with the Blackhawks, a surprising amount of trades with the Ottawa Senators considering they were in the division, and the team they had traded with the most, the St. Louis Blues. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. I'll have to keep that in mind for the trade deadline. And then the Leafs made a trade for Ryan O'Reilly and Noel Acciari from the St. Louis Blues. Now, these patterns were way easier to see with Kyle Dubas on account of he only got hired in 2018. He had a smaller resume to work with. Like I said, Treliving was the GM in Calgary for nearly a decade. He just had more time to do more stuff. Now, there might be something else you notice, Steve. There's a little flaw here, and yes, I know. Because sometimes GMs are a GM and then they get fired, but then they get rehired somewhere else as an assistant general manager or some other position. In that case, some of the teams that Treliving has dealt with the most, again, the Pittsburgh Penguins. Why? Because he's made 3 deals with Kyle Dubas. He's made 4 deals with the Montreal Canadiens because he's made 3 with Kent Hughes and 1 with Jeff Gorton, who's also in the organization. He's also made 4 deals with executives in the Seattle Kraken, 3 with Ron Francis, and 1 with their AGM, Jason Botterill, from his time with the Buffalo Sabres. Then, of course, there's Pierre Dorion with Ottawa, who is just Pierre Dorion. They have a very lean staff right now, 5 trades. But the team that could potentially be a team to watch for the Leafs to make a deal, because this is what this is all about, is the LA Kings. And that is because Treliving has made 3 deals with current Kings GM Rob Blake and 3 deals with Marc Bergevin, who is the AGM in LA and apparently interviewed for the Leafs GM job. For those of you keeping count at home, that is 6 completed trades between executives in the LA Kings with Brad Treliving. Then, of course, the spiciest one of them all, the Calgary Flames. Obviously, since Brad Treliving left, there has been lots of turnover. Guys have been hired. Dave Nonis was hired. Jerome McGinley was hired. You'll notice I didn't say Craig Conroy was hired because Craig Conroy wasn't hired. He was promoted. He was hired by Brad Treliving as one of Treliving's first moves in his first summer with the Calgary Flames, summer of 2014. So the GM of the Calgary Flames was hired by the GM of the Toronto Maple Leafs, and they worked together for a very long time. And I don't know if you were paying attention to Twitter today, the Flames got some guys who kind of want out. The reports, according to a variety, Frank Saravalli, Chris Johnston was tweeting about this, I think Elliot Friedman as well. Noah Hannafin supposedly won't re-sign with the Calgary Flames. Michael Backlund won't re-sign. Tyler Toffoli won't re-sign, and I believe Elliot Friedman said he straight up just wants to be traded. He's not too fussed about where. And there were also conflicting-ish reports about Elias Lindholm wanting out. Those are some huge potential trades for the Calgary Flames. Want me to make it even more spicy? Okay, you can look at it a couple different ways. Number 1, if you're a proponent that the Leafs could or should or will trade one of their core 4, those are some very big name players in Calgary. Could there be a package of, I don't know, Toffoli, Hannafin, maybe Backlund's involved? Is there a package there with the Calgary Flames that they could send to Toronto for? Take your pick. Is it William Nylander? Is it Mitch Marner? Nylander was born there, by the way, in Calgary, if you want to get real fun about it. But I will add this little monkey wrench in there. Remember I said that Brad Treliving made the most deals in his Calgary Flames tenure with Pierre Dorion and the Ottawa Senators. That's still true. But we don't know who made the phone calls. Sometimes it's the assistant general manager who's doing all the legwork, doing all the phone calls, all the texts, all the meetings for a certain trade, or they're assigned a certain team. For every team, it's different. Sometimes it's the director of hockey ops. Sometimes it's the assistant to the general manager. Hello, Jason Spezza. Goodbye, Jason Spezza. I miss you, Jason Spezza. The reason I bring that up is what if Craig Conroy was on most of those calls, all of those calls, some of those calls with Pierre Dorion over the years in Calgary. Backlund's available, Hanifin's available, Lindholm might be available, and Toffoli's available. Who's available in Ottawa? Yes, I am absolutely going there. Alex DeBrincat. Would he go to Calgary? Would it make some sense for him to go to Calgary? It's a really tantalizing, interesting little idea. And I would bet money that over the last few weeks, Craig Conroy has put in phone calls to Brad Treliving and Pierre Dorion. And if he hasn't yet, then he will before Nashville. Then there's other members of the Calgary organization who Treliving could work with, call, maybe even try to poach from the Calgary Flames. Jordan Sigalet is the director of goaltending for the Calgary Flames. They have a goalie coach too. It's a different guy. Brad Treliving hired him in 2014. Todd Button is an interesting case because he's one of the few executives within the Calgary Flames organization who was with the Calgary Flames already when Treliving joined them. He was there, I think, 2011, and he lasted his entire tenure. He was the director of amateur scouting, so you're talking about, going to a bunch of probably WHL games, OHL, Q. There's Michael Sharon, an analyst for the Flames, who was only hired in 2021. Ray Edwards, the director of player development since 2016. Jason LaBarbera, the goalie coach since December 2020, so the guy just got there. Cale McLean, Calgary assistant coach, hired in 2021, that's it. Then Don Maloney is a fascinating one. He was hired in 2017 to be the VP of Hockey Ops, and then he was promoted to Senior VP and President of Hockey Ops, and they also worked together with the Arizona Coyotes before their time with the Flames. I would be very surprised if Brad Treliving and Don Maloney have not spoken since Treliving was hired. Kirk Muller, his name was in some Leaf rumors before reporter Chris Johnston reported that the Leafs are probably keeping Sheldon Keefe. Muller was hired to be associate coach of the Calgary Flames only in the summer of 2021. Bob Murray, the former GM of the Anaheim Ducks, I think was Treliving's last hire as a scout in February 2022. Brad Pascal, he's one of the assistant general managers in Calgary. His name came up in some GM jobs the past few months. And Treliving worked in him in Calgary since 2014. Derek McKinnon, I don't know if he's related to Nathan, but he was the director of player personnel with the Flames since 2014. And then there's a few interesting ones that go all the way back to Treliving's playing days, because this dude played junior, a little bit of AHL, ECHL. Brad Treliving played at different levels with Kevin Cheveldayoff, who is the GM of the Winnipeg Jets, and Jarmo Kekalainen, who is the GM of the Columbus Blue Jackets. Easily the weirdest part about that, Treliving has never made a deal with either of those guys. He never made a deal with Kevin Cheveldayoff's Winnipeg Jets, and he never made a deal with Jarmo Kekalainen's Columbus Blue Jackets. There is one more guy, though, who Treliving played with for the Columbus Crunch, a guy by the name of Derek Clancy. It took a lot of clicking on HockeyDB to find this one. He's currently the assistant general manager of the Vancouver Canucks, actually, and for a long time he was with the scouting department of the Pittsburgh Penguins. Again, these are just connections anyone can pick up on. They don't necessarily mean anything, and even though he's connected to Cheveldayoff and Kekalainen, he's never made a trade with them. And the last thing I want to note with Treliving's resume from his time with the Calgary Flames, the agents. Admittedly, I didn't go back and look at every agent Treliving ever dealt with in his time with the Calgary Flames. That would take forever, and I don't want to. But I did take a look at all the agents for all the current Calgary Flames on their roster, and this information you can find on puckpedia.com. The Flames have two guys represented by Dan Milstein of Gold Star. Leaf fans know about that guy real well. He represented basically every Russian player that has come through the Leafs over the last half decade, Ilya Mikheyev, I think, being chief among them. Another agency with multiple players on the Flames is Bartlett, Scott, and Brian, the two agents there. There's another agency with two players, O2K. CAA has 4 Calgary Flames spread over 2 agents. And then the number one agency that the Flames, and therefore Brad Treliving, dealt with was Newport. They have 6 players with 3 different agents on the Flames main roster. Why is that important? Well, those agents have players all over the league, and they like dealing with who they like dealing with, and a bunch of their clients are going to be unrestricted free agents in about a week. A list of players represented by agents at Newport who are going to be unrestricted free agents unless they sign a contract over the next week or so include John Klingberg, Matt Dumba, Lars Eller, Tristan Jarry, Michael Stone, who has followed Brad Treliving everywhere, Mark Pysyk, Zach Parise, Gustav Nyquist, Phil Kessel, Trevor Lewis, Ryan O'Reilly, Nick Foligno, Nick Ritchie, Michael Del Zotto, Corey Perry, former Leaf Sam Carrick, former Leaf Scott Sabourin, and Malcolm Subban. And that's not even every UFA represented by Newport, that was just some of them, and that does not include the restricted free agents who could definitely be traded as well. Maybe even offer sheeted. I said no one offer sheets. So, what do we learn from all this? Or at very least, what can we extrapolate? Because at the end of the day, this is useful information, but we're just guessing, man. First and foremost, every GM, pretty much ever, has guys in their organization they are super attached to. That is why I would bet the farm that Brad Treliving is going to bring over some Calgary guys, whether that's staff or players. One guy who's an unrestricted free agent, really little guy, really high scoring guy, Matthew Phillips. Another sneaky little thing, the Leafs have a number of roster spots to fill out. They're going to have to go to free agency for some of those. Look for potential Newport clients, maybe even CAA guys. We know Brad Treliving has made a ton of deals with Pierre Dorion. We also know, based on Kyle Dubas' tenure with the Leafs, that Pierre Dorion is not afraid of making trades with the Leafs. So maybe that continues. In the same way that Treliving would be attached to players from his former organization, I think Kyle Dubas would definitely be attached to former players from his former organization, from the Toronto Maple Leafs. Treliving and Dubas have made 3 deals together before. I could definitely see a Toronto-Pittsburgh deal in the works. LA Kings are a fascinating one because, like I said, 3 trades with Rob Blake and 3 trades with Marc Bergevin. There could be something there. And as a final note, Treliving contractually with the Calgary Flames is not allowed to fully participate in the Leafs draft coming up next week in Nashville. He's not allowed to be at the draft table. I assume he's going to be at the draft, and I assume he's going to be on his phone. He's going to have to do something. I wonder if it's a trade or 2 or 9. So, what did you think of that abundance of information? Was that helpful? Do you feel like you know the Leafs' new GM a little bit better? Let me know in the comment box down below. But for now, that is it for this one. Thank you very much for watching. Click like if you like this video. Click subscribe if you really liked it. Tell all your friends. I don't know what I would do without Cap Friendly. I really don't.